Hello, fellow fantasy sports fans. Welcome to MFSN The Hub's Fantasy Baseball Draft Preview Show, Thursdays at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. I'm Dr. Dan Ratner, and I'm here, as always, with Casey Vlad to the Bone Scheinvold and Ross the Boss.
Ross the Boss here, coming live from La, California. And we have outfielders today. We'll talk about how many outfielders there are and why you should stay away from a few and draft a few that we really like. So I can't wait to start.
Okay, and just so people know, next week we're going to do starting pitchers and relief pitchers in one sitting because we want to get all the draft previews done before the bulk of the drafts. And of course, you know, a lot of drafts are happening now, so we want to get it in as early as we can. So our assignment today, as I see it, is, you know, you can't just do top 10 outfielders because every league has at least 3 outfielder spots. They probably have more. So I ranked my top 20. I think you guys did too. I've got sleepers, values, and busts. So let's do what we usually do. Let's talk about the top tier first. How many are in your top tier, that first tier that's just above everybody else? Ross, 2. Okay. I can see that. Actually, I would say I probably agree with that. Casey, what about you?
I'm just counting. 1, 2, 3. I actually have
15.
5.
That's a record for top tier for Casey Scheinfold. Usually is like 1 or 2. This is unbelievable. I can't wait.
This is great.
Your top tier. I'm chopping at the bit.
I mean, I was trying to decide, is the top tier 2 players or is it 5? So we probably have the same players. But Casey, start us off with, well, actually, Ross, you have the top 2. So we're going to start with you, and then we'll go to Casey.
So, I mean, I'll go with Casey's favorite player, Aaron Judge. I mean, he's a threat all over the place. I mean, if he stays healthy, the thing is stay healthy, and I'm not going to say it a million times. I'll say it one time. If these players stay healthy, and they all have health, a lot of players have health issues, so I'm not getting into that. But Aaron Judge, number 1, unbelievable outfielder, RBIs, batting, everything he does is great. He can't catch an easy flat ball. We'll talk about that later, Casey Scheinfeld.
Hey.
We'll talk about that later. But Aaron Judge is 1. And number 2, I'll give it to, you know, just because everywhere he goes, he hits, is Juan Soto. And he's playing in New York, and they played him all that money. And this guy is a real player. And, you know, I just feel those 2 guys are on the tier by themselves. I really feel that.
So I agree with you, Ross, but I don't think that tier is super high above the next tier, actually. I mean, they are a tier above,
okay,
to me. But I've got 3 guys that I would consider in a very close second tier, but they are off from that. Casey, who's missing for you?
I can't wait for this.
He did Judge and Soto?
Yep.
Yeah.
I assume they're both in your top tier.
Just for
can't wait.
Clarification, I didn't include guys like Mookie Betts or O'Neal Cruz, and not that they're top tier necessarily. Guys who Jazz Chisholm, guys who I would play at another position. I didn't consider them in top outfielder ranks.
Yep.
So I have the other ones I have are Kyle Tucker. I think he's absolutely in that
Mr.
first tier.
Brushin, go on. Mr. Brushin didn't play for 3 months. Keep going.
He still played 100 games, I think.
Did he?
I still put Corbin Carroll up there. I know he had a bad start to the year, but his second half was much better. And Julio Rodriguez. I have both. I have those 3 also in the top tier.
Well, I got to check on how many. Listen, I have Kyle Tucker in our.
I will tell you right now.
It did not feel like he played 100 games. It felt like he played maybe 70, maybe.
All right, let me. I could be wrong.
I love how much this cracks up, Ross. But I do have Kyle Tucker 3rd anyway. I mean, he's an absolute monster when he plays.
Listen, I have a Brushin also.
Oh yeah. Oh, there it is. There it is.
I can't.
Ross will be back for.
I have a Brushin. Seriously, I do. But I still play. I still walk around. I'm still okay.
Yep. Just like normal Brushin.
I mean, Corbin Carroll had a.
Okay, you're right. He only played 7.
Top 5 pick last year. Top 3 pick last year. He did not have a great season.
No, I know that. Kyle Tucker played 78 games. I have Rodriguez
in our
78 games
league, and I was very disappointed in his season too. And all these guys, I think they can bounce back, but I don't have him. You can't put him in the same tier with Judge and Soto because of last year's. You can't do it.
I agree. I mean,
it's not. It's not fair to Judge. Aaron Judge worked so hard, Casey, the whole year of having a great season, and now you're putting him in the same tier with Corbin Carroll. and Rodriguez and Tucker. You're doing that to Aaron Judge? How dare you?
Wait, Casey, were those the other three? I think I missed that. Corbin Carroll and Julio Rodriguez were the ones that went up in there?
Yeah, that's the same tier as Judge,
Okay.
like the same. They're in the same little club.
Look,
they're not.
Kyle Tucker in 78 games hit 23 home runs.
I don't care
So if he plays 150,
runs,
you're talking 45 home runs and 30 steals.
He broke Dan Ratner's heart last year. Okay,
I know.
He destroyed him.
But you know what he didn't break? His leg. He just bruised it.
He could have broken his leg in 20 places.
But it was a hell of a bruise.
I mean, look, I think we talked about this last time. It's pretty clear to me that the Astros dealt him because he would not play, and they thought he should.
No.
That's what I think is going on. Kyle Tucker is the one person in this second tier that I could easily see, though, arguing just talent-wise is up there with these other guys. But given what just happened, I can't put him in the same tier. I don't have, by the way, Julio Rodriguez or Corbin Carroll even in the second tier. They're in my third tier.
Wow.
They're in my third tier.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And, you know, okay, so the other guys I have in this tier, Yordan Alvarez is my number 4.
I want to ask you about him. I'm worried about he's coming off a big injury. I mean, I believe in him, but I hope he's the same hitter when he comes back from that injury.
I mean, I believe that he will be, but obviously you don't know. And listen, the next guy I have is a similar kind of player. I have Ronald Acuña, number 5.
It's another question mark.
And I understand the question marks, but I'm
11.
You have him 11. Okay, I understand. But I guess maybe I am less risk averse than
is it the second ACL in the same knee?
I think that is true.
And he's going to miss the start of the season. Yes. That's why I have him downgraded.
Well, of course he's going to be downgraded. I'm just saying I'm not downgrading him.
I have 7 outfielders, 7 who I'd be comfortable taking in the first round of a draft.
And I would say
how many teams are in your 20 teams?
If it's a 12 or 14 team league, there's 7 I would be comfortable with.
Well, let's see. That's a good point because Acuña is, even though I have him number 5, would I take him in the first round? I'd be hesitant to do that.
Right. But would you take, I mean, look, I have Aaron Judge would go in the first round. I have Kyle Tucker, Juan Soto. Corbin Carroll, I think, is still a first round fantasy pick because
I don't think so.
If you look at his second half, at the way he finished the season,
I'm looking at it.
He was on a 40 homer pace over the final 3 months. And he's a 250 hitter. That's what holds him back. But even with as bad as everybody said he was, 22 home runs, 121 runs scored, and 35 stolen bases to go with 75 RBIs.
I'm with you, but let me make another argument.
First round.
No, but I think he's a tier 2 guy. I just don't have him in the same tier as Aaron Judge or Juan Soto. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying he's a great player.
Well, we're saying 3 different things. I mean, you guys disagree on that point, and I agree with Ross on that. But I don't even think Corbin Carroll is a top 12 pick. And just because you have to think about the other positions. I mean, would you take Corbin Carroll over Vladimir Guerrero? I wouldn't.
Well, so Casey won't. I mean, it's his name.
Of course not. But listen, if you count up those positions.
I think a lot depends on the structure of your league. Like we just did a draft last night where it's a 2-catcher league. Would you have really taken 3 catchers in the first 10 rounds?
No, definitely not.
Any other
I
league?
agree.
So if we're in a league that has 5 outfielders, which isn't unheard of.
But are we ranking it based on that? Because to me, we're just ranking it based on your standard league, where there's going to be 3 outfielders.
I guess my question is Corbin Carroll that far below Kyle Tucker in terms of what you could expect from them in the season?
No,
I think they're pretty close.
I don't think there's a huge gap between Kyle Tucker and Corbin Carroll. There's a lot of talent in the outfield. I mean, wait till I read these other names that I have on my list. There's a lot of those names. Now, I will say I did include Mookie Betts.
I didn't because he's shortstop this year.
I don't want to confuse the audience. So. I just left him off. I mean,
here's the reason I did include him. I agree with you, Casey, in terms of not including somebody like O'Neal Cruz. I'm not going to draft O'Neal Cruz as an outfielder. I'm drafting him as a shortstop. I would prefer to draft Mookie Betts as a shortstop, but he's still high enough up on the list that I'd love to have him at outfield anyway.
Okay.
No, I'd rather have him at second base.
Oh, I'm with you on that also. I'm just saying he still fits in my outfield rankings because I would still start him in the outfield if I had gotten, other players at those positions. So here's who I have. I have Mookie Betts 6th. I have Fernando Tatis 7th. I have Julio Rodriguez 8th.
Okay.
And to me, that's another tier right there. Then there's a little drop off. I really like Jaron Duran.
I have him ninth.
I have him ninth also. And then I have Corbin Carroll. And I may be, this may be one of those things where I'm underselling how good Corbin Carroll actually is. He certainly has the talent. I'm still ranking him 10th.
I guess when I'm looking at tiers, right? Would I be happy if I had this guy as my first outfielder? Then that's a tier 1 outfielder, right? So I'm not going to complain if I have Julio Rodriguez as my first outfielder.
I'm not either, but
right?
I don't think so. But I don't think he's in the same tier as Aaron Judge.
I realize here, for full disclosure, I'm being a bit of a hypocrite because I just talked about catchers and said there's only one tier 1 catcher, but and now I'm saying, but it has to be who you're happy with having as your top player. But like, to me, the difference between 1 and 6 or 1 and 7 is, other than Aaron Judge, is actually quite small.
Yeah, but the other thing, Casey, is almost every league.
We talk about going from one tier to another means the drop off is significant enough from this guy to that guy that the value changes incredibly. That it's so much better to get the last guy in tier 1 than it is the first guy in tier 2.
But not necessarily incredibly.
Fernando Tatis to Julio Rodriguez or Corbin Carroll, that's not a drop off to me.
I don't think there is. I think there's a second tier. And you know what?
Maybe it's 1 and 1A. I don't know, but
I think of it more as 1 and 2. But even the second tier outfielders,
and I actually
you'd be
have
happy to have
Tucker
as outfielder 1.
I have Kyle Tucker above Juan Soto on my list.
Ooh, I like it. I have him below Juan Soto. After the shin.
I have Corbin Carroll 4. I actually have Fernando Tatis and Julio Rodriguez 5 and 6. Then Yordan Alvarez, just because he doesn't run. Everybody else is at least a threat to give you the extra category. Then I have Jackson Chourio 8th.
I have Jackson Chourio number 7.
Yeah.
I think he's a definite 30-30 guy. And
I think he's a stud.
He's a stud, and he's going to be better this year than last year.
I think he's going to be a top 5 type of pick.
If you look at what he did last year, every month he got better and better and better.
Oh, yeah.
And this year he's going to have a breakthrough season, and he's going to be in talks. Casey Scheinfeld. I'm not saying he's winning for MVP.
Certainly, if Milwaukee does better than expected.
I think Ohtani's going to be a tough guy to beat at that.
So, I have Chourio at 12. I don't think that's that much of a difference, honestly. But I'm just building in the fact that he's a young player, and we just don't know how quickly he's going to come along. I totally agree with what you guys are saying, though, and I would not be at all surprised if next year we're talking about Jackson Chourio as a top 5 outfield pick, hands down.
Yeah, this guy. Guys, this guy's definitely the future in baseball.
Yeah, he hit over 300 from June 1st on. Yeah, he's not even 21 yet, and he ended with a 2020 season.
He was always a monster prospect as well.
Remember that? Remember when they signed him, Casey? They gave him all this money, and he didn't play one day of Major League Baseball. Right?
Yeah, they already extended him in the majors by that point.
And I remember, we were all looking at each other, saying, why would they pay this guy all this money? And
they were taking the Ronald Acuña approach.
The answer is they know this guy's going to be a phenom, and he really is. The word phenom fits him pretty good. So there you go.
So the other guy I have in my top 10 is my number 10 that we didn't talk about is Jackson Merrill, the kid out of San Diego.
Jackson.
But look at his stat. I was looking at the
other rookie Jackson.
Right. For fantasy purposes, it's not great.
A 290 average, 24 home runs, 16 stolen bases, 90 RBIs, 77 runs scored as a rookie. How can you say Jackson Chourio's numbers, which weren't incredibly higher than that as a rookie, are so impressive when Jackson Merrill's aren't?
It scares me. The whole San Diego thing scares me. That ballpark is so not for hitters.
I think we need a freeze frame on Ross's face when San Diego players come up. He just is like
Xander Bogaerts.
It's worse than DeAndre Swift.
Tony Gwynn.
I love Tony Gwynn. All right, so let's talk then. It seems like we're basically in some agreement of where these most of the top 10 are. But where is there a big drop off? Because to me, it's right here that we're talking about.
I think my tier 3 is I'll let Anthony Santander.
I have him 19.
I love him. I love Teoscar Hernandez. He's tier 3 for me also. And I didn't put Jazz as I put him as an infielder, so I'm not counting him.
Sure.
But another guy that I think is going to have a big bounce back year is Wyatt Langford in Texas. I mean, he had all this potential last year, and he didn't do anything until like the last part of the season.
But his numbers are fairly solid even with that. And so
I know.
I think
that's why
he had a big year, and no one talks about him. No one cares because
I know who it is.
Is Marcelo Butler? No, it's Marcelo Zuna. Look at his.
I have him as a value pick.
But look how many home runs he had last year.
And he's done it before.
He seems to always end up 30, 100 with around a 300 average.
Well, hold on. The problem with Ozuna is he doesn't do it always. It's like every other season, so you just you don't know what you're going to get with him. You could get a monster year out of him, or you could get a disaster. But I think it's worth investing and finding out, especially.
To answer your question, for me, the drop off, I have Ronald Acuña at 11, and I have him at 11 just because of the injury. He's not starting the season. Who knows if he's not going to steal 80 bags ever again after 2 ACLs. I just can't see it happening. I could be wrong. No, that's where I think the big drop off is after him. If he plays the way he's supposed to, the drop off's after him. If he plays the way an injured twice knee Kirk Gibson is, then the drop off's before him.
All right. So, it just depends on where your rankings are, but I think we're agreeing with essentially where the drop off is. It's after a certain type of player. For me, Jackson Merrill is the last one.
Another guy I have in my third tier, and look at his season he had last year. It was unbelievable. Is Brent Rooker.
That's what I thought you were going to say.
Does he qualify in the outfield? Because he was primarily DH. I didn't include him.
At least in Yahoo leagues.
Okay. Because I have him as a DH.
What did he hit? 290, 39 home runs last year?
I have his buddy Lawrence Butler on the list.
Larry.
They both had a great year, but Rooker was a monster.
Rooker had 39 home runs, 293 batting average, 11 stolen bases.
Oh, yeah.
And no one knows him because he plays in Sacramento. No one cares.
No one even knows where he plays.
I can't even name the stadium where he plays in. It's like a cow palace. I have no idea. But Brett Rook, if you take this guy as one of your outfielders, it's a great pick.
I felt like for me, picks 12 to 20 were all like you could put them in a basket and draw a name, and I would be fine putting them in order.
Okay, so let's listen to some of your 12 to 20 guys.
Well, after Acuña, I go with Michael Harris Jr.
Whoa.
Ooh, I have him as my biggest outfield bust.
I have him not relevant in fantasy baseball. And tell me, I'll tell you, his stats are just not. They're not good.
Okay,
this is going to be an interesting discussion. All right,
because he has no power.
Well, look, he's a 20-20 kind of guy. He hit 16 home runs last year. I realize it, but they said it was his exit velos were the same. His expected batting average was all the same as when he was 2020 the year before. It just wasn't. It didn't match with his underlying stuff. I think, to me, he's a high floor guy, right? And so I was looking for predictability there. But after Michael Harris, I go with James Wood, the kid out of Washington.
James Wood.
I like James Wood, yeah.
If you look at what he did in 7, what was this? How many games did he play?
It was about what Kyle Tucker played.
Yeah.
But it felt much better.
Right. Now, the problem was, and he did that. He did 9 home runs, 14 steals with a 55% ground ball rate, which is very, very high, and only a 64% steal success rate. Imagine as he gets better at that stuff, what his numbers could be. I then went with your boy Teoscar because I love him in LA. Just to be in that lineup is beautiful. Yeah. I have Wyatt Langford, Lawrence Butler, Luis Robert Jr. I think he's a junior also.
Is it Robert or Robert?
I don't know.
I believe it is Robert. I've learned the hard way by trying to make him French.
But then you haven't mentioned
Well, hold on. Then I went with Brenton Doyle.
Yeah, I like Doyle out of Colorado.
I went with Anthony Santander 19, and then 20 was Seiya Suzuki.
Now, where is Kyle Schwarber on your list?
I don't have him. I will never own him, so I can't rank him.
I have him ranked 18th, which is high for me for Kyle Schwarber.
Look at his. Look at his power numbers.
His power numbers are crazy.
He's great.
But you only need him for 31 days of the season. The rest of the year, you don't want him.
No argument.
And that is highly problematic because I can tell you, it's not going to feel good. You can get the numbers if you ride it out the whole time, but you're going to ride out some really rough times with Kyle Schwarber.
Yeah.
My strategy with Kyle Schwarber, even though I have him ranked 18, I will never draft him. I will trade for him when he is sucking. And I may not even trade for him, but I'm not going to draft him, even though I do think he is the 18th best outfielder as I ranked them.
Somebody I had last year,
somebody I want to invest in,
that had major back surgery. I mean, he had the back surgery. Like when you have back surgery, as you know, guys are both doctors. You guys know that's like the worst thing you can have.
We're not that kind of doctor, but we're aware.
Hey, I prevent people from having back surgery.
You guys don't play yourself down so much. You guys know that field a little bit. My friend wrote a book about back pain. So.
Especially me. I know how to prevent people from having.
I had no idea it was you. I don't no clue. So Christian Yelich had back surgery.
I have him as a value pick.
He was doing he had a great season right before that surgery. It was unbelievable.
I have him ranked 15th.
They interviewed him and asked him about his health. He said he's going to play opening day.
So, Ross, I'm curious what you think about this. I have him ranked 15th, and here's why. If Christian Yelich plays only half a season doing what he does, and then you plug in any outfielder with him, you're better off than almost everybody else that
that's fair. That's 100.
You know who that makes me think of for you, Dan? And now we're going back 15 years. Troy Tulowitzki. Dan owned Troy Tulowitzki in a keeper league for years. He would play 75 games and put up better numbers than any other shortstop in those 75 games. And he was like, I don't care that he's hurt half the year.
Play him with anybody, right?
I love Troy. I saw him play in college. Great player. Got hurt too many times. And you can't vote for him for the Hall of Fame anymore.
Trevor Story kind of did the same thing after Tulowitzki left.
He was so similar that I get them confused in my head. So I did want to say Brent Rooker to me is a real story because I have him ranked 13th. I mean, he's a really.
If I had put him in, I had in my mind that he was a DH only guy, like a Shohei, because I mean, so I would have put him in my top 15 easily.
Yeah. But then, there's a lot of guys like you mentioned, Teoscar, Marcell Ozuna, Schwarber. We know what I think about him.
Okay, here's a Casey Seinfeld question.
Yes.
Because he's an expert. Cody Bellinger, Casey, what do you do with them? Do you think he'll have a big year? Is it somebody that you're drafting or you're just staying away?
I don't think I'd stay away from him because I like him in Yankee Stadium, and he has that uppercut swing can lead to countless home runs on pop flies in Yankee Stadium. I more look at him as a first baseman than an outfielder.
Okay.
I think that's because he qualifies at both. I have a feeling he's going to play center field more for the Yankees unless they move Jazz Chisholm out there, which they've talked about. So I don't know what their plan is ultimately, but I like him. I'm betting on a 240 batting average, but I could easily see 30 home runs, 100 RBIs. I mean, they're going to play Paul Goldschmidt at first, which when he can actually swing a bat, but so he might play more center field. But I like him. I mean, I would grab him late in a draft and feel okay with him.
Let me just make this one point also, which of course we make many times, and Casey, you especially make this point, but because he's first base and outfield, to me, he's one of these guys that, you may prefer to play him at first base because first base is thin, but it's so valuable to have those two positions. You're going to be able to fit this guy in many different places. I have him as one of my value picks. It feels very clear that he'll be there. And as Ross was saying, he was saying Casey's an expert, which he is a fantasy expert, but he's also an expert on the Yankees. And so I think that's why Ross wanted to know what did he think about Cody Bellinger. So we're moving into that third level. We're outside of the top 20.
Yeah.
Let's talk. And Casey, you mentioned some names that I have in my sleepers, some that I have in my value picks. Ross, let's start with you. Give me a sleeper or two that either nobody's talking about or that you just think is going to make a huge leap forward this year.
I have a good feeling. I saw him play last year and he looked great during some streaks. Is Pete Crow Armstrong of the Cubs. I love this kid. I really feel potential wise. He grew up right near my house. I mean, he's a few miles away.
He's Ross's son.
He's my largest. He's my biggest bust player.
Ooh, I have him as a sleeper.
Wow. Another guy that no one really talks about, but we talked about him yesterday when we were drafting is Tyler O'Neill of Baltimore. He went to Boston and he hit with the ball really hard, and now he's in a lineup in Baltimore where he's not going to be the guy that it's going to be walked that much. They're going to pitch to him. I think with that lineup and where he's at, I think he's in a great spot to have a huge year. Is Tyler O'Neill? I think he'll play every day. That's the rumor going around town, but we'll see what happens. He could be alternating or platooning. We don't know. Another guy, every year we talk about this guy, and everybody says, "Oh, he's going to have a great season. It's going to just be his breakout year," and he's getting better. But I think this year could be a season as Riley Green of the Detroit Tigers. I really like this guy. I feel that
Dan certainly hopes so.
I think he'll have a really good season this year, and I think the Tigers will do really well too. I don't think they'll win the division, but I think they can make the playoffs. But you know, those guys are the guys that I haven't talked about much yet, but those guys I do have on my radar, and I think we should at least consider them when we're drafting, because you're not going to get all the tier 1 and tier 2 guys on your team. Trust me.
And your third outfielder is not likely to be, Brent Rooker. That's not going to happen. So you do need to look for guys like this. I have Riley Green as a value. As you guys know, the way that I usually split it is like, sleepers are either rookies that haven't done it yet or people that no one's talking about. And then value picks, to me at this point, Riley Green is a value pick simply because he's a known commodity. But I agree with you, Ross. I think he's gotten better and better. I think the Tigers are going to be very good. I even think that, I said the Guardians would win the division, but I could see the Tigers taking that division. It'll be
the
tough.
Guardians will win, but I think the Tigers will make the playoffs. One
of my value picks is actually somebody who was the number 1 draft pick for like 10 straight years, Mike Trout. They're moving him out of center field. He's going to play right field, which will hopefully keep him healthier. And when he doesn't run anymore, but you're not going to get a 5 category producer in the 14th or 15th round where you can get Mike Trout now. And if you have him as your 3rd or 4th outfielder, that's not so bad. The other guy I love, and nobody's talked about him, Jurickson Profar. He last year for San Diego, now this guy was a number 1 prospect for 4 or 5 years, had shoulder issues that kind of held him back. Last year, 280 average, 24 home runs, 10 stolen bases, 94 runs scored. And he went to Atlanta. And now he's going to be batting in front of Matt Olson and Austin Riley and right behind Ronald Acuña. They have him scheduled as the 2-hitter. And that is just a prime spot to be for a guy. And if he can hit 280 again, which isn't unheard of, he could score how many runs? And I just think you can get him at the later rounds of most drafts, and he can produce like a second.
Let me play a little bit of devil's advocate on that one, because I have Jurickson Profar as a bust.
Well, you have 2 of my guys as busts.
Actually, I have Mike Trout as a bust also. So it's interesting. For some reason, we're on very different pages about this. Trout, I just don't trust his injury history at this point. I just don't think he's going to stay healthy. He's got a track record for this. And as a mind-body doctor, I feel like he's all screwed up in the head right now. And I'm not saying that.
And I guess I have a hard time saying somebody's going to be a bust if you're drafting him as your 3rd or 4th outfielder, because they're waiver wire fodder at that point.
Well, that's true, except Mike Trout's name is going to make somebody draft him high.
Well, that's somebody who's not a good fantasy player.
Yes, but you got to keep in mind there's a lot of bad fantasy players out there. There really are. Every league has them. That's true. At least half the league is going to potentially draft Mike Trout way too high. There's just people who aren't paying that much attention or aren't that committed to it. What I wanted to say about Jurickson Profar, though, is, when a guy switches teams, you can get excited about the lineup he's in, but sometimes maybe it's a different hitting coach. Maybe it's different chemistry on the team. I would rather see the guy on the same team he was on. If he's done it there, I'm much more comfortable with it. And I'm not saying that's always true, Casey, but that's one reason. And also, we've seen him not do it many times.
Yep. Yeah. But, and that's why I say that's why I put him as a value pick, because you're not going to waste a high pick on him.
I think in a sense, we both have a good argument about that. I could see him as a value pick, and I could also see him as a bust from the vantage point of somebody being excited about the value and then finding out they got nothing. All right, Case, let's talk about other sleepers that you have. I did have Pete Crow Armstrong as one of my sleepers. You have him as a bust. Why don't you talk about him first as a bust, then tell us about some of your sleepers.
He ranked in the bottom 2% of all plate discipline metrics last year.
Ouch.
And he doesn't have even good exit velocity when he barreled the ball. And so what he does have is he's arguably the fastest player in baseball. And so if he strikes me as Billy Hamilton. Okay. And so Billy Hamilton for years was drafted way too high because people thought this was going to be the year he learned how to hit. And, what was the adage with him? You can't steal first base. Right. And so I see Pete Crow Armstrong the same way. And he's also a blue chip defender, Pete Crow Armstrong. But he's good. And because of his poor bat to ball, he's going to bat at the bottom of that Cubs lineup. I just don't think there's anything for him to get counting stats. But yeah, he's crazy fast. He makes highlight types of plays. So people are going to draft him thinking he's a stud. I think he's a better real life baseball player than fantasy baseball player.
The PCA, I think, is going to be a lot better year this year than last year. Remember, last year he was brought up last year. He played.
Oh no, I get it. But plate discipline worries me, right?
Yeah,
like if he had a low batting average on balls in play, but he wasn't shaking pitches, striking out more than everybody else.
That happens a lot with young players. They get discipline. You don't think their coaches are looking at tapes and saying the same thing you're saying. He'll get better. He'll have a good year this year. We'll see. I think he'll do at least a 2020 season this year, maybe even 30-30. We'll see what happens. But if he plays every day, I think we'll see.
I mean, if he's getting on base, I think he's going to get more than 20 stolen bases.
Yeah, if he gets on base, he'll have 40 plus stolen bases. I don't doubt that at all. My fear is it's going to come with a 221 batting average, and
you know what's funny though? It's funny because like a 221 batting average used to be like you
Steve
basically
Baldoni.
don't belong. You don't belong in the majors.
Sent down immediately. Now it's like
I mean, what was the Mendoza line? Wasn't it 200?
No, it was 200.
Really?
Well, last year he batted 237, and the league average was 241, so he wasn't that far from the league average.
I got to look up what the Mendoza line was, but Casey, you may be right.
Mendoza line's 200.
That's what I thought. 200.
Yeah, I said 200.
No, you said
220. It's named after.
I said 200. You said 220.
It's named after Mario
right?
Mendoza, who played in the 70s.
That's funny. I must be tired.
He's a horrible player.
That's really funny. All right, I'm going to check it out just to be sure. But Case, who are some other sleepers? Either guys that nobody's talking about or rookies like maybe Jason Dominguez or something.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have some prospects on that value area, but I mean, the other guy I have ranked as a value guy isn't because he's going to win your league at all. Brian Reynolds, nobody talks about him, but this guy always hits between 270 and 290, hits 20 bombs, steals double-digit bases. There's nothing sexy about him, but if you can plug one position like your outfielder 3 and know you're going to get a 2015 280 with above average runs and RBIs, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I have him as a value pick just because he's been around for a while, but it's the same argument.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, like when we look at Brenton Doyle and what he did, we're hoping that he can do it again. Brian Reynolds is going to do it
every time. The difference is Brenton Doyle has a higher ceiling.
Exactly.
Right? And so,
which is why I rank him higher. But,
yeah,
at the same time, Brian Reynolds is going to do that.
Ironically, Jason Dominguez, who feels like he's been around forever, still qualifies as a rookie because of injuries. So he could be a rookie of the year. This is going to be the starting left fielder for the Yankees. We've seen what he can do in his small sample sizes in the majors in between injuries. He's coming off of Tommy John, I believe. And so if he's healthy, this is a power speed guy. The Yankees, gave him the largest signing bonus ever when he was 16 for an international prospect. I know it's since been beaten. You got Roman Anthony in Boston, who is just, I mean, let's be honest, he's a stud. He's the best probably outfield prospect in baseball right now. Speed and power, good plate discipline. I mean, he does it all. He has a decent, he has even a reduction in his strikeout rate going up the minors, like going from double A to triple A. He struck out less, which is impressive. Dylan Cruz in Washington, he might actually start the season as their everyday outfielder. If he does, this is another guy who was drafted around the same time as Wyatt Langford and Paul Skeens and all those guys, just as high of a ceiling there for power speed. And there's a kid, Emmanuel Rodriguez in Minnesota, who should get a call up. Now he has a ridiculous He has a high strikeout rate, but it's a weird one. It's because he doesn't chase anything unless he feels like he can barrel it up. He actually swings at less pitches in the strike zone, which is why he strikes out more. But he's got a 422 on base percentage, and he just crushes the ball with his exit velo. And he's a one, over 1,000 OPS. So it's another guy who could get the call up probably in the midseason in Minnesota, and he could come out there and just be dynamite. Another power speed guy.
Well, let me ask this, and I'll ask it of you both. But like with rookies like this, we know they can have a big impact. In football, with like rookie wide receivers, I always say wait for half the season and then they'll provide value. What do you usually expect with baseball players like this? Let's say they're starting up, in the majors from the beginning.
See, if it depends. I mean, look, you and I are psychologists, right? So it depends on their mental approach. If they're strong, like if they can handle kind of the pressure that comes with being in the majors, I think what you typically see is kind of like what Austin Riley did. He came up, and because nobody knew him, they didn't know where the holes in his swing were. He hit like 13 home runs in the first month and a half he was up. Then as the league figures them out, they go into a kind of a dip. And if they're really good players, they figure it out again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally. I think
I just think because they end up, it's like, okay, let's pitch this guy like a traditional baseball player, up and down in the zone with your fastball, changes eye level, but they don't know where the holes are. Like, they don't know that he can't hit the high and inside pitch or whatever it is. And once they figure that out, you see the regression.
And actually, I think this is a similar argument to what Ross was making on the other side with Pete Crow Armstrong, that it's all about the adjustments. Are they going to make the adjustments or not? But I like the point you're making, Casey, because it's not just about the first adjustment. Then there's the adjustment to the adjustment. And you've got to watch that, especially with those young players early in the season. And so let me ask you this. If one of them gets out to a red hot scorching start, are you going to deal them?
No. Well, it depends on the league. In a keeper league, never. Or a dynasty league.
Most people are playing redraft league. So let's say you're doing a redraft
league, depending on what I could get for him and what my team needs, right? So if I have if I have two really good outfielders and I drafted Dylan Cruz late or Jason Dominguez later, and they're suddenly tearing it up, and I need a second baseman or a third baseman, and I can flip them for an Alex Bregman or a, pick somebody else who's strong at those positions. Yeah, I'm going to flip them. This
is one of the joys of redraft leagues, I feel like, is the risk is just much lower. If you deal a guy like Jason Dominguez who's tearing it up and then he becomes, the next,
like Trout,
right? Then you're going to be kicking yourself for years. But in a redraft league,
I'll draft him next year.
Ross, who do you have to add from sleeper or value? You can talk about either one.
I like Spencer Steer of Cincinnati. I feel, again, he plays outfield, but he's also an infielder also. But Steer last year, he was money last year. I mean, anytime the Reds needed a hit for a win or a run, he was there. I feel that he's somebody that no one talks about because it's a small market team. And then another question I have for you guys is, what do you do with Reynolds from Pittsburgh? I mean, I love.
Well, I had him as a value player. That's
I love Ryan Reynolds, but I mean, is he somebody you draft, you stay away from, or you draft late?
Ryan Reynolds?
Yeah.
Oh, I draft him.
Casey and I are
I'll take him as my third outfielder when nobody's paying attention to him every time.
I would love to have him as my outfielder 3, but Ross, you disagree?
Look, he's not sexy, but you know you're going to get near 2020 production.
I've been staying away from him the past few seasons. I just think there's a lot better options out there. I don't feel his stats are that great. Last year, he did not hit well in the beginning of the season.
He still ended up with 275, 24 home runs and double-digit steals.
Exactly. Somebody that I am staying away from on my big bust list is Randy Arozarena. I'm not drafting him this year.
Tell us why.
Every year he's been getting worse and worse. And last year he was available in like all these he's available on waiver wire. I mean,
he had a great postseason, and he's been riding that. He had like 4 months of a good season and a dynamite postseason, and everybody assumed he was the next power speed stud and made fun of St. Louis for trading him to Tampa, and now St. Louis doesn't look that bad. The person I want to ask you about, Ross, is somebody who you've loved for years, and I didn't hear you mention him today, is Adolis Garcia.
You know, he just strikes out so much and leaves the bases loaded, or he'll have like 2 home runs when they win 14-2. But
kind of like Alex Rodriguez.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, and
says the
I just feel his batting average isn't that great, and he's slowing down, and he's injury prone. He gets hurt a lot, and I'm staying away. I'm not telling people to buy into him this year. I just think there's so many other choices that are younger and that will have similar seasons. I mean, will he hit 30 home runs? Yes, if he plays 130 games. Will he steal bases? Yes, but again, he has to play.
Let me ask you this, though, Ross, because you were high on him in previous seasons, and you were right. So what were you seeing before?
Aggression.
Is there a change? There's just
aggression, age,
okay,
injuries.
And he was more clutch back then, it felt like.
I mean, I just feel, again, as much as I hate to say it, when you get older, your body breaks down a little bit.
Dan, you should talk to him about that.
You know,
well, I can help.
Already he's having troubles with his oblique, so he's DHing today, yesterday.
Ooh, and I don't like obliques for hitters. They can be out for a long time.
Last year he had 25 home runs, 85 RBIs, 11 stolen bases. He did play 154 games, which is good, but again, only 11 stolen bases, which is low for him. And because in 2022 he had 25 stolen bases. He did hit 224, which is way below the league average. So again, I mean, when you're batting 224 and you have 25 RBIs and 85 RBIs and you have 25 home runs, it's not that great. And again, if you can draft him late, go for it. But people, he'll get drafted, but I'm just saying, you got to pick and choose your poison, and he's not the poison I'm choosing.
So I'm going to mention one sleeper, one value, and one bust, and then we'll weigh in on busts, and we'll wrap it up here. But one sleeper that I have is Kerry Carpenter.
Detroit.
I think he is an emerging player, and I watched him in the playoffs. He's a tough out.
The problem with him, and I agree with you, I like him a lot. They won't play him against lefties. And so if you're in a weekly league, you have to look at what starters they're going against that week and stuff like that.
Yeah, for weekly leagues, it's tougher. It's funny. I only play daily lineups usually. I also do like Lawrence Butler. I know we mentioned him before.
We'll call him
as another value pick that we didn't mention, I do like Lane Thomas, but Nick Castellanos also is not getting mentioned, and he can put up some really solid numbers.
Another guy that's
you're thinking he's regressing, and he may be. I mean, he is regressing, but
let's go. I mean, yeah. I mean, the guy. I mean, Kerry Carpenter last year played 87 games, 18 home runs, no stolen bases. But let's say he plays 160 games. That's close to like 40 home runs.
Assuming he can keep up the pace, and he's a pretty good shoe-in for 30 home runs, I would say.
Yeah, and he's bat 284 last year. So,
and I'd much rather have Kerry Carpenter than Nick Castellanos. They're like in some ways similar players, except Kerry Carpenter's on the way up and Nick Castellanos is on the way down. I will say this as a bust. This pains me to say it, but Stephen Kwan is a great Major League Baseball player. Great.
Yeah.
But I don't really want to have him that much in a fantasy team. I mean, he doesn't even run that much. Doesn't drive in any runs. He's going to hit maybe 5 homers. So you're really depending on him for average. He reminds me of Luis Arias a bit. He's a fantastic actual baseball player.
If he reminds me of Brett Gardner from the Yankees many years ago.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he'll hit 290, but he'll have no power stats.
He'll run a bit. He'll score a lot of runs, but
nothing great. 100% right. That's a good call.
All right. So other busts. Let's finish up on this, guys. Any other busts that we haven't mentioned?
I put Luis Robert in my bust junior because I have him ranked in my top 20, and you have to draft him. His ADP is 82, so that's in the 7th round. But last year it was a 224 average with 14 home runs, even though in 23 it was 38 home runs and 20 steals, one of only 5 players to do that. You know, and so you're paying for a 30-30 kind of guy, and you also have the risk of an injured 220 hitter who gets 12 home runs and 15 stolen bases.
I mean, he's also playing in a terrible, terrible lineup. And,
he is,
you know, and that's bad, you know, in terms of the counting stats, but it also is bad in terms of a player's mentality. So I could totally see it. Ross, anybody to add as a bust?
Just, I mean, my number one bust is Randy Rosarena. I mean, everybody else, I don't want to talk bad about that many players, but I don't think Suzuki of the Cubs is draftable this year. I don't think his stats are that great when it comes to fantasy. And another guy that I think is on the down, you know, last year he proved it, Cedric Mullins. Just stay away. Don't draft him. Just stay away from Cedric Mullins. As much as I told you last year to draft him, don't draft him.
For as bad as my Ellie De La Cruz pick was for a possible bust, that was one of my better ones.
Yep. We all, every dog has his day.
Broken clock is right twice a day.
I had Cedric Mullins last year. Horrible pick.
We all do it. All right, guys, let's wrap up there. Next week, it'll be 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. We're going to do starting pitchers, and then we're going to do, at the end, we will get in those closers, trying to push it back as far into the towards the season as possible, because so much information emerges about closers as you get closer to the season. Of course, there will have been a couple games, but we're hoping to have you completely ready for your drafts. We wish you luck. Casey, and Ross.
For starters, my number one starter this year is Garrett Cole. Is that a good pick for me to take or not?
Okay, we've just lost all credibility. Thank you, Ross. Appreciate that.
Nolan Ryan.
I prefer Nolan Ryan over Garrett Cole this year.
I bet he could still strike out 3 or 4.
I mean, Nolan Ryan would do better than Garrett Cole this year.
Did you see him, like, was it 4 or 5? It was like 3-4 years ago. He threw out the opening pitch, and he threw the ball like 85 miles an hour.
How old is he? That's incredible. Nolan Ryan.
He threw the ball like he was pitching again. It was unbelievable.
All right, guys. We'll wrap up here. We'll see you next week. And then once the season begins, get ready to tune in on Tuesdays with Casey and Ross for the Waiver Wire Show. It'll be the 3 of us on Thursdays for the strategy and trade show. And we look forward to carrying you through the season. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thank you, Casey and Ross.